My name is Dr. Aaron Benanav. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at Humboldt University in Berlin, and next autumn I'm going to be moving to Syracuse University in New York, where I'm going to take up a position as a professor in the sociology department. And I'm also going to be a core faculty member in the Autonomous Systems Policy Institute there. The book I wrote, Automation, the Future of Work, is a book about automation. It's a book about what jobs are going to look like in the future, but it's very different from other books on that topic, because unlike those books which often paint a picture of a coming dystopian future where no one has any jobs, or possible utopia where no one has to work, my book gives a more empirical and grounded account of what's actually happening with technologies today. And I show with empirical evidence and statistics that the story we're being told about automation in the media, by governments and so on, is not really that accurate. I show that, there is a real problem around job security today. Many people are finding themselves without access to the kind of work that they need to feel secure in their lives. But that problem is due, I say, not so much to an acceleration of technological change and the advent of a new age of workless workplaces, but rather it's due to a general slowdown in the rate of economic growth. In other words, the problem isn't really that jobs are being destroyed at a faster pace than they were in the past, it's that jobs are not being created as fast as they were before. And so from this very different empirical perspective, I consider a range of other questions about politics, about the possibility of a universal basic income, about what the future of jobs are going to look like and whether they're going to be more secure or insecure. And I also look at ways that we could get to a much better world, a world of what I call post-scarcity, even if automation turns out to be more of a dream than a fast-approaching reality. Universal basic income is a fascinating proposal for how to change our relationship to work in our society and how to help those who are in need, who are too poor to be able to afford the goods and services that they need to live. Now, I'm a critic of universal basic income, but whenever I talk about it, I talk about the positives of it first, why so many people are excited about this idea. Because I think it is an exciting idea and it's really worthy of our attention. What I find so inspiring about the idea of universal basic income is really the idea of this universal provision that raises everybody out of poverty. The universal part of it is really important too. I live in a country, the United States, where most welfare programs are means tested. And you might think that that's about ensuring that people really are in need when they ask for welfare benefits. But in reality, in the United States, the means testing, what people have to prove in order to get their benefits, has been extremely punitive. It's been designed to make it very hard for people to access their benefits. And what researchers have found is that many people who would benefit, who really qualify and need this assistance, find it very hard to navigate the bureaucracies required to actually gain access to what they need. And so the idea of this universal provision is that people have it regardless, no questions asked. And some people would say, well, then the rich are going to get this benefit too. And in a way, yeah, sure, you could tax it back from them if you wanted. But I think that the universality of it is actually an important principle because it sort of says everybody deserves this, whether they're rich or poor. And it kind of takes it away from a kind of economic question. It makes it a political question about what we deserve, what we all deserve as human beings. And I think that in itself is a really important idea. Now, some people have been critical of universal basic income, and I have been too, because to my mind, it's really important to see that there have been proposals for universal basic income coming from across the political spectrum. And of course, that includes people on the far right in the United States, people like Charles Murray, who's one of the most infamous racists in America. He's a big supporter of UBI. And then you have a range of different economic and political thinkers and political parties that have shown interest in this idea, all the way to far left groups. And so it's had this really wide range. The difference to me between the right-wing programs and the left-wing programs is that on the right, universal basic income is usually seen as a replacement for the existing welfare state, whereas for those on the left, they see it as an additional welfare program. And so by necessity, the left-wing programs are going to be more expensive. In order to get to their goal, they're going to have to expand welfare provision. One of my general points is that we live in a time of slowing economic growth, and that actually makes it really hard to imagine a very highly beneficial universal basic income ever coming around. We've lived through 50 years of slowing growth and unrelenting austerity and deficits and cuts. And in that time, I think what we've seen is that it's been very hard to advance a project of increasing welfare benefits. So given the fact that the automation theorists, in my view, are wrong, it's going to be very hard to get a universal basic income that does what it's sort of most emancipation or freedom oriented, those who really wanted to end poverty for good, it's unlikely to look like what they want. It's much more likely to kind of emerge at a low level and then remain at that low level and not really be able to rise to the challenge of what the proponents want from it. There's an additional problem with universal basic income that I think we should really talk about, which is that universal basic income proposes to meet people's needs by giving them money. And it's sort of saying that, whatever problems people face, by giving them money, they should be able to go out and solve those problems themselves. And I think that that is a really inadequate perspective. And one way to think about why it's inadequate is by analogy to climate change. So in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, a lot of people said we could solve climate change with a carbon pricing system. By pricing carbon, we could fix the problem. The idea there was that there was just a problem. The market system was generally working very well. The only problem was that carbon didn't have a price. And so if we created a market for it, then it would solve all of our problems. Today, more and more people think there isn't really a market solution to this. We need big public investments in order to change our energy mix. It's not something that the market's going to solve itself. We're going to need to have huge investments undertaken at the public level, maybe in partnership with private firms, to radically transform the infrastructure of our society, to change the way we use energy, also to build houses or transform housing for people so that it's more energy efficient, to change the way we do transportation. And all of those things require big, coordinated investment plans. And the same is true. The same kinds of problems apply to UBI. The idea of UBI is that the market system is basically working well, and the only problem that we face is that there's these poor people who don't have enough money to buy the things they need. And so if we give them money, it kind of completes the market in a similar way to how carbon pricing was supposed to complete a market. In reality, giving people money isn't enough. We need, again, massive, especially facing climate change, we need these massive, coordinated public investments to build the services that people can access in order to have a better life. So that's going to require big investments in education, healthcare, housing, energy provision, and so on. And once you think about that, once you think about the investment side of the problem, not just the income side, you see that there's a lot more that we have to do and can do in order to solve the big problems that we're going to face in the future, which include not only how to solve poverty, but solving poverty in the context of the dramatic changes that we need to undertake to prevent global warming.